The kitchen was a cocoon of quiet that afternoon, March 14th, 2025. The kind of stillness that settles into your bones after a long day. The dishwasher hummed its low, steady song, a faint counterpoint to the clink of pots I was scrubbing in the sink. My hands moved mechanically, suds slipping over my knuckles, the warm water a small comfort against the chill creeping up my spine. I didn't hear Lily coming until her sneakers squeaked against the tile, sharp and deliberate, like the crack of a whip slicing through the air. "Check this out," she said, her voice a blade dripping with scorn. My 16-year-old daughter stood in the doorway, an envelope clutched in her hand like a trophy she'd won in some bitter game I didn't know we were playing. She stormed forward, her hazel eyes, mirrors of mine at that age, flashing with a triumph I'd never seen in her before, cold and cruel. The envelope hit the counter with a slap, the sound echoing in the hollow space between us. "DNA results? Care to explain why Dad isn't my real father?" My hands froze mid-scrub, a plate slipping back into the soapy water with a soft splash. The air thickened, heavy with her words, and I felt my pulse thudding in my ears, a frantic drumbeat I couldn't quiet. I reached for the dish towel, drying my hands slowly, each swipe buying me a breath, a second to steady the tremor rising in my chest. I'd known this day might come, had pictured it in fleeting, shadowed moments, but not like this. Not with my Lily, my girl, standing there radiating contempt, her ponytail swinging like a pendulum marking the end of something. "Sit down, Lily," I said, finally, my voice quieter than I meant it to be, a thread of calm I clung to like a lifeline. "We can't talk about this standing up." She scoffed, a harsh little sound that cut deeper than I'd expected. But she dropped into a chair, anyway, the wood creaking under her weight. Her arms crossed tight over her chest, her posture a wall of righteous fury, and that envelope sat there between us, a silent judge with its crisp white edges stained faintly by her grip. I turned off the faucet, the drip of water slowing to a mournful rhythm, and faced her fully for the first time since she'd walked in. "My name is Anthea Carter, and at 42, I thought I'd built a life sturdy enough to weather any storm. But here was my daughter, her gaze boring into me, peeling back the years I'd spent stitching our family together with careful, invisible threads. I'd always known the truth might surface. DNA doesn't lie. Not forever. But I hadn't braced for this, Lily wielding it like a weapon, her smugness a mask for something I couldn't yet name. The kitchen, with its familiar smells of lemon cleaner and the faint tang of dish soap, felt suddenly foreign, a stage set for a reckoning I wasn't ready to face. "How long have you been lying?" she demanded, her voice rising, each word a jab. "Does Dad even know?" I took a breath, steadying myself against the counter's cool edge, and met her eyes. This wasn't how I'd pictured telling her, not like this. The kitchen held its breath as Lily's question hung between us, sharp and accusing. "How long have you been lying? Does Dad even know?" Her words sliced through the quiet, each one landing like a stone in the pit of my stomach. I leaned against the counter, the cool edge pressing into my palms, grounding me as I watched her sitting there, arms folded tight, her chair angled like a barricade. The dishwasher's hum had faded into a distant murmur, leaving only the drip of the faucet, a slow, mournful pulse echoing my racing thoughts. I'd spent 16 years building a life for her, for us, and now she sat there, dismantling it with a single envelope and a glare that could have shattered glass. I eased myself into the chair across from her, the wood creaking under me as if protesting the weight of this moment. My hands folded on the table, fingers lacing together, a small anchor against the storm brewing in her eyes. "Every choice I've made," I began, my voice steady, despite the tremor I felt inside, "has been to shield you, Lily. to give you the best life I could. Your father, James, he knows you're not his by blood. He's always known." The words slipped out carefully, like I was laying fragile things before her, hoping she wouldn't crush them in her anger. She scoffed again, but it was weaker this time, less certain, her arms tightening around herself as if to hold her fury in place. "So what? You've been playing him too? Keeping him in the dark while you—" She cut herself off, her gaze darting to the envelope, its edges crumpled from her grip. I followed her eyes, seeing the stark black print of the DNA results, peeking through the torn flap, a cold confirmation of what I'd long buried. I'd known this day might come, had rehearsed it in quiet moments when the house slept, but not like this, not with her voice dripping venom, her face a mirror of mine at 16, yet stripped of the softness I'd once carried. "James isn't in the dark," I said, leaning forward slightly, willing her to hear me. "He chose us, Lily. He chose you before you were even born." Her eyes flickered, a crack in her armor, and I seized it, my voice softening as I pressed on. "I was pregnant when we met, alone, scared, with no one else. He didn't have to stay. He could have walked away, but he didn't. He's been your father every day since, not because of some test, but because he wanted to be." The kitchen seemed to shrink around us, the walls drawing closer as the weight of my words settled. Lily's jaw tightened, her lips parting as if to argue, but nothing came. I could see her mind racing, the smug narrative she'd walked in with starting to fray at the edges. A memory flickered through me, her at 2, toddling across the living room, James kneeling with arms wide, his laughter filling the space as she crashed into him. That was the father she knew, the one she was now questioning, and it twisted something deep in my chest to see her doubt it. "Why didn't you tell me?" she finally asked, her voice smaller, less a demand than a plea. She uncrossed her arms, her hands falling to the table, fingers twitching toward the envelope then pulling back. The shift in her tone tugged at me, a thread of vulnerability I hadn't expected so soon. I reached across, my hand hovering near hers, grateful when she didn't flinch away. "Because some truths need time," I said, my thumb brushing the edge of her wrist, a tentative bridge. "You deserved to grow up feeling safe, loved, not tangled in a story you weren't ready for. But you're here now, asking, and I'll tell you everything. Just not as a fight. Not like this." My eyes held hers, searching for the girl who'd once crawled into my lap during storms, hoping she was still there beneath the anger. Lily looked down, her lashes casting shadows on her cheeks, and for a moment the kitchen was silent again. Just the drip of the faucet and the soft thud of my heart. She wasn't ready to let go of her hurt, not yet, but the fire in her gaze had dulled, replaced by something unsteady, fragile. It was a start, a crack in the wall she'd built, and I clung to it, knowing the rest of our story, mine, hers, James's, waited just beyond this fragile pause. Lily's question lingered in the air, fragile as a thread stretched too thin. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her hands rested on the table now, no longer a shield, her fingers twitching as if unsure whether to reach for me or pull back. The kitchen felt suspended, time stretching, as the dishwasher's hum faded into a distant whisper, leaving only the faint drip of the faucet to mark the silence. I held her gaze, her hazel eyes softer now, searching mine for something. Truth, maybe? Or the mother she'd trusted before this envelope tore us open. My hand stayed near hers, a quiet offering, and I took a breath, knowing the story she deserved couldn't wait any longer. "I was 20 when I met him," I began, my voice steady, despite the ache creeping up my throat. "His name was Ryan. I was in college, barely scraping by, living off instant noodles and late-night study sessions, and he was this burst of light in all that gray, charming, ambitious, The kind of guy who could talk his way into anything. I thought it was love, Lily, the real kind, the kind you build a life on. I paused, the memory washing over me like a wave, his easy grin, the way he'd lean across a diner booth making me laugh until my sides hurt. But that brightness had a shadow, one I didn't see until it was too late. Lily leaned forward, her breath catching, hanging on my words. "What happened?" she asked, her voice so quiet it barely broke the stillness. The anger had drained from her, replaced by a hunger I recognized. The need to know where she came from, who she came from. I swallowed, my fingers tightening briefly against the table's edge, and pressed on. "I got pregnant with you," I said, meeting her eyes. I was terrified. 20, alone, my whole future unraveling. But I thought he'd stay. I told him one night, sitting on his beat-up couch, the TV flickering in the background. His face changed, Lily. That charm just vanished. He said he wasn't ready, that he had plans, law school, a career, a life that didn't include a baby. "Handle it," he told me, "like you were a problem to fix." When I said I wouldn't, that I was keeping you, he disappeared. Blocked my number, changed his email, gone like he'd never been there at all. Her eyes widened, a flicker of shock crossing her face, and I could see her piecing it together. Ryan, the name, the man who'd left us. "His parents," I continued, my voice tightening. "Your biological grandparents. They tracked me down after he cut me off. Offered me money to stay quiet, to keep you a secret. I didn't take it. I didn't want their hush money. I wanted you to have a life full of love, not shadows and shame." The memory stung, their cold voices on the phone, the envelope of cash I'd mailed back unopened. I dropped out of school after that, moved back home, worked 2 jobs with a swollen belly, determined to give her what they wouldn't. Lily's lips parted, a question forming. "But then how'd you meet Dad? James, I mean." Her voice trembled, and I saw the shift, curiosity edging out the hurt, pulling her closer to the story. A small smile tugged at my mouth, the ache easing as James's face swam into focus. "I was working at a diner," I said, warmth seeping into my tone. 7 months pregnant, feet aching, barely keeping my eyes open. James was a regular, tall, quiet, always left a good tip. One day, I nearly fainted taking his order. Too tired, too stubborn to sit down. He caught me, eased me into a booth, brought me water, stayed until my shift ended. Didn't blink when he saw my belly, just asked if I was okay. I laughed softly, remembering his shy grin, the way he'd fidgeted with his coffee cup. He started coming by more, bringing me apples, bananas, saying he'd read pregnant women needed extra nutrients, like he was already looking out for us. Lily's chin quivered, her hand stilling on the table. "He didn't care you were pregnant with someone else's kid?" she asked, her voice breaking, and I felt my own eyes prick with tears at the wonder in hers. "No," I said, reaching across to take her hand, grateful when her fingers curled into mine. "He said it was a 2-for-1 deal, the best he'd ever gotten. We got married when you were 6 months old, Lily. He insisted on adopting you. Put his name on your birth certificate because he wanted the world to know you were his, in every way that mattered." My thumb brushed her knuckles, anchoring us both as the memory bloomed, James cradling her tiny form, his eyes shining like she was a miracle he'd claimed. The kitchen softened around us, the evening light filtering through the blinds, casting golden streaks across the floor. Lily stared at our joined hands, her breath uneven, and I could see the pieces shifting in her mind. Ryan's abandonment, James's choice, the life we'd built from the wreckage. "He really chose us," she whispered, almost to herself, and I nodded, my heart swelling with the truth she was starting to grasp. "He did," I said, my voice thick. "Every day since. That's what family is, Lily. Not just blood, but the people who stay, who choose you back." The faucet dripped on, a steady rhythm now, and I held her gaze, willing her to feel the love that had carried us here, knowing the rest of our story. Harder truths, deeper bonds, still waited to unfold. Lily's whisper, "He really chose us," hung in the kitchen like a fragile promise, her fingers still curled into mine across the table. The evening light slanted through the blinds, painting golden streaks on the worn linoleum, and the faucet's drip had settled into a steady heartbeat, a quiet companion to the truth settling between us. Her eyes, wide and searching, held mine, and I could see the shift, Ryan's abandonment fading into shadow as James's love took root. But our story wasn't finished, and the next piece, the harder one, pressed against my chest, demanding its turn. I squeezed her hand, anchoring us both, and took a deep breath. "There's more, Lily," I said, my voice soft but firm, carrying the weight of years I'd kept locked away. "When you were 4, Ryan came back." Her breath hitched, her grip tightening, and I pressed on, the memory sharpening like a blade. "He'd seen a picture of you. His parents had been watching us through old college friends, though I didn't know it then. One day, he showed up at our door, standing there in a crisp suit, polished shoes, looking like the life he'd chased had finally caught up with him. He said he'd made a mistake, that law school and his career weren't enough anymore. He couldn't stop thinking about the daughter he'd walked away from." Lily pulled her hand back, just an inch, her brow furrowing as she processed this. "He came back?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, a mix of disbelief and something sharper, fear, maybe, or anger resurfacing. I nodded, my gaze steady, and the kitchen seemed to tilt with the weight of that day. Ryan's voice, smooth and practiced, cutting through the hum of our little life. He'd gotten married by then, had a good job, but he said something was missing. He wanted to know you, Lily, said he regretted it all. My throat tightened, the echo of his words, stirring the old hurt I'd buried beneath James's quiet strength. Before she could ask more, the front door creaked open, and James's familiar footsteps echoed through the hall, solid and sure. Lily tensed, her head snapping toward the sound, and I felt a rush of relief as he appeared in the doorway, still in his faded flannel from work, his dark hair mussed from the wind. His eyes found mine first, then Lily's, and he set his keys down with a soft jingle, a steadying note in the storm we'd been navigating. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice warm, crossing the room to pull her into a hug before she could protest. Her arms hesitated, then wrapped around him, her face pressing into his shoulder, and I saw the tears she'd been holding back dampen his shirt. "What did you do?" Lily asked, pulling back to look at him, then me, her voice trembling but insistent. James kept a hand on her shoulder, grounding her, and I reached across the table again, needing to bridge the gap. "I told him he'd lost the right to you," I said, my tone resolute now. "The day he walked away, he gave that up. Being a parent isn't something you pick up when it suits you." James, he'd been there for every fever, every scraped knee, every night you woke up crying. He was your father, Lily, in every way that mattered. James's jaw tightened, a flicker of the old fight in his eyes, but his voice stayed calm as he took over. "He threatened to take us to court," he said, squeezing her shoulder. "Said he had money now, could prove he was your biological father, demand custody." But we fought back. He glanced at me, a silent pact in his look, and I nodded, picking up the thread. "We had proof. Years of him rejecting you before you were born. Letters from his parents trying to buy my silence. Plus, James had adopted you legally. The law was on our side, but more than that, we weren't going to let him drag you into a battle just because he'd decided he was ready to play dad." Lily's eyes darted between us, wide and glistening. "What happened then?" she asked, her voice small, and I softened, leaning closer. "He backed off," I said. "Realized pushing it would hurt you most of all. But he asked one thing, that when you were old enough, we'd tell you the truth. Tell you he regretted it, that he'd grown up and saw what he'd thrown away. We agreed, but on our terms, when we thought you could handle it. The kitchen fell quiet, the blinds rustling faintly as a breeze slipped through, and I watched her absorb it, her shoulders slumping under the weight. James slid into the chair beside her, his hand still on her shoulder, and looked at me across the table, his steady presence a balm to the raw edges of the story. "He's still around," I added gently, testing her reaction. "Runs a law firm downtown, has 2 kids with his wife. You're half-siblings, biologically. But that's up to you, Lily. If you ever want to know more, we'll help you. It's your choice." Her breath caught and she looked at James, tears brimming. "You're my real dad, right? No matter what." He pulled her close, his own eyes shining. "Always, kiddo. Nothing changes that." The kitchen wrapped around us, dusk deepening outside, and I felt the strength of our little family solidify. A bond forged not in blood, but in the choices we'd made, the love we'd built, brick by brick. James's words, "Always, kiddo." Nothing changes that. Settled over the kitchen like a soft blanket, wrapping us in their quiet certainty. Lily clung to him, her face buried in his flannel, her shoulders shaking with the tears she'd held back too long. The dusk outside deepened, shadows stretching across the linoleum, and the blinds cast slanted patterns that danced faintly with each breath of wind. I watched them from across the table, my hand still outstretched where hers had been, my heart swelling with the sight of them. My daughter and the man who'd chosen her, chosen us, without a second thought. The envelope, crumpled and forgotten on the counter, seemed smaller now, its power dimmed by the truth we'd laid bare. Lily pulled back, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand, her breath hitching as she looked between us. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking, raw with a vulnerability I hadn't heard since she was small. I thought I'd uncover some big lie, that you'd been hiding this awful secret to hurt me. I wanted to hurt you back because I've been so mad lately, and I didn't even know why." Her words tumbled out, jagged and honest, and I felt them pierce me. Not with pain, but with relief. She was still my girl, beneath the anger, beneath the test that had sparked this storm. I slid around the table, closing the distance, and pulled her into my arms, feeling her tremble against me. "You're 16, sweetheart," I murmured into her hair, the familiar scent of her shampoo grounding me. "Being mad is part of it. Figuring out who you are, pushing against the world. But next time, talk to me. Ask me. Don't dig up our history like it's a weapon." She nodded against my shoulder, her sobs quieting, and I stroked her back, the rhythm steadying us both. The kitchen held us close, the faucets drip a soft echo of the tears we'd shed. And I knew this moment, messy, real, was mending something I hadn't realized was broken. James reached over, his hand resting on her arm, his eyes meeting mine with a warmth that carried years of unspoken promises. "You found something else instead, didn't you?" he said, his voice gentle, coaxing her to see it. "Not a lie, but us, still here, still yours." Lily lifted her head, her cheeks streaked with tears, and looked at him. Then me, her gaze softening as the pieces clicked into place. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You found that family's more tangled and beautiful than blood," I said, finishing his thought. "It's about who stays. Who builds it with you, day after day." She sniffed, glancing at the envelope, its edges torn from her earlier fury. "I don't need it anymore," she said, her voice small but sure, and reached for it with trembling fingers. She tore it in half, then quarters, the paper ripping with a soft, final sound, and let the pieces flutter into the trash bin like leaves falling away. The act was quiet, deliberate, and I saw something shift in her, a weight lifting, a peace settling into the lines of her face. James's hand tightened on her arm, his own eyes glistening, and he leaned closer, his voice thick with emotion. Choosing you, Lily, best thing I ever did. That test doesn't erase a single moment of what we've got. The kitchen glowed with the last of the day's light, a golden haze that softened the edges of everything. The table's worn wood, the bin where the DNA results lay discarded, the three of us sitting there, raw and real. Lily wiped her eyes again, a shaky laugh escaping her. I feel so stupid, she said, looking at me, then James. I thought I'd ruin everything, but it's still here. You're still here. I squeezed her hand, my own tears pricking as I smiled back. We always will be, I said. Growing up means questioning things, but you don't have to do it alone. We've never wanted to hide from you, just protect you until you were ready for the whole messy truth. James nodded, his arm sliding around her shoulders, pulling her against his side. And now it's out there, he said, his tone steady, warm. No more secrets. If you've got questions about Ryan, about anything, we'll figure it out together. Lily shook her head, leaning into him, her expression softening into something younger, more open. Not now, she said quietly. Maybe someday, but right now I just want this. You guys. My real family. Her words landed like a gift, simple and profound, and I felt the last of the day's tension unravel, leaving only the love that had always held us together. We sat there as night crept in, the kitchen a cocoon of light and shadow, the blinds rustling faintly. The torn pieces in the trash caught my eye, a reminder of what she'd let go. Not just the test, but the story she'd built around it. Lily nestled between us, her breathing evening out, and I knew this wasn't an end, but a beginning. A bridge built from the wreckage of doubt to a deeper, unshakable trust. Lily's words, my real family, lingered in the kitchen as night folded around us, the golden glow giving way to a soft, silvered darkness. She slipped upstairs after a while, her footsteps a faint patter on the stairs, leaving the echo of her choice to settle into the quiet. James and I stepped out onto the back deck, the cool March air brushing my skin, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and budding spring. The stars glittered above, sharp and clear, and I leaned into him, his arm a warm weight around my shoulders, as we sank onto the weathered bench, the wood creaking softly beneath us. The day's storm had passed, leaving a stillness that felt like healing. You holding up? James asked, his voice low, a steady thread in the night. I nodded, nestling closer, the roughness of his flannel against my cheek, a comfort I'd leaned on for years. Better than that, I said, my breath misting faintly in the chill. This had to happen. Not the way it did, maybe. But Lily needed the truth. We all did. The kitchen light spilled through the window behind us, a warm square against the dark. And I thought of her up there, moving around her room, brushing her hair, maybe, or curling up with a book, the ordinary sounds of our life weaving back together. He tilted his head, gazing up at the sky, his profile soft in the starlight. She's tougher than we know, he mused, a small smile tugging at his lips. Like her mom. I turned to look at him, this man who'd walked into my chaos and stayed, who'd held Lily as his own from the first moment he saw her. Thank you, I whispered, my voice catching, for everything, for loving us both so completely. He pulled me closer, his hand finding mine, fingers lacing through in a quiet promise, and I felt tears prick my eyes, not from sadness, but from the depth of what we'd built. Inside, Lily's footsteps paused, then resumed. A familiar rhythm, a reminder of the countless nights we'd listened to her grow, from toddler wobbles to this fierce, questioning girl who'd faced us today. "Do you think she'll want to meet him someday?" I asked, my voice hushed, the thought of Ryan flickering briefly across my mind. James considered it, his thumb brushing my knuckles. "Maybe," he said, "and if she does, we'll be there." But today showed her something bigger. That the truth isn't always what we expect, and the family we choose can outlast anything we're born into. I nodded, a deep peace settling over me as the stars winked above, witnesses to every path that had led us here. Every fear, every fight, every quiet morning that had stitched us tight. The secret I'd carried wasn't a secret anymore, and somehow that made everything sharper, clearer. Lily's test, meant to fracture us, had only pulled us closer, a reminder that our family wasn't perfect, but it was ours, forged in love, held by choice, strong enough to weather any storm. As we sat there, the night wrapping us in its calm, I knew we'd keep choosing each other one day at a time. A week before the funeral, I'd sat by Grandpa James's hospital bed, holding his fragile hand. The machines beeped faintly, his breath a rasp. He was 78, fading, but his eyes still held that fire I'd grown up chasing. "Scarlett," he'd whispered, voice barely there. "You're the only one I trust." Tears stung my eyes. My whole life, Grandpa was the one who saw me, really saw me. Not Linda, who'd spent years calling me a disappointment, brushing off my questions about the business as childish. "Don't let them take what I built," he'd said, his grip tightening just enough to feel it. "They'll try, and when they do, don't be afraid. I've prepared everything." I hadn't understood then, not fully. Now, back in that oak-paneled room, it was starting to click. The lawyer cleared his throat again, pulling a sealed envelope from his briefcase. Linda's glare flicked to him, expectant, like she was waiting for him to fix this. Instead, he glanced at me. "Mr. Rogers left a letter, to be read if there's confusion," he said, unfolding it. Linda shifted, arms crossed. Tom leaned forward, fake smile still plastered on. The lawyer began. "Scarlett, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. And I'm sure your mother's outraged. She'll claim it's unfair, that she was supposed to get everything. But the truth is, she lost that right long ago." I glanced at Linda. Her lips were a hard line, unreadable. "Your mother always thought money was power," the letter went on. "But she never grasped that power takes responsibility. I gave her chances when she was younger, decades of them, to prove herself. She chose shortcuts, luxury over leadership, selfishness over sacrifice." Tom's face twitched. The lawyer kept reading. "As for Tom, if he's there, he's probably hiding his true colors. But I know what he is, a leech, a man who saw a payday in my daughter's bank account. I won't let my life's work fall into his hands." Tom went beet red, his jaw clenching. Linda trembled, humiliated. "Scarlett, you're different," Grandpa's words continued. "You never expected anything from me, that's why I chose you. You worked hard, you learned, you respected the business, not as a cash machine, but a legacy. I watched you grow, and you're the only one I trust to carry it on." My heart pounded. All those summers shadowing him in the office, taking notes, asking questions while Linda rolled her eyes. He'd been watching. Linda slammed her hand on the table. "This is ridiculous," she spat. "He was old, sick. He wasn't thinking straight." "Actually," the lawyer said, calm as ever, "Mr. Rogers updated his will 3 months ago. He was of sound mind. It's airtight." She turned on me, eyes blazing. "You really think you can handle this? You're making a mistake, Scarlett. You'll fail." I leaned forward, meeting her stare with a slow smile. "I guess we'll see, won't we?" That night, she tried again. "We need to talk," she said the next morning outside Rogers Enterprises, her tone eerily smooth. Just us, family, no lawyers. Tom stood beside her, his smile rehearsed. Not here, he said, glancing around. Somewhere private. I should have walked away, but I wanted to hear it, their next move. Fine, I said. 5 minutes. In a small conference room, Linda's voice softened, almost gentle. You're in over your head, Scarlett. Grandpa put an impossible burden on you. It's not fair. I smirked. And you think Tom should run it instead? Yes, she said, no hesitation. He's got experience. You could learn from him. Tom leaned in. A partnership. You keep the title, I handle operations. No pressure, no tough calls. You can enjoy your life. I crossed my arms. So, I'd be a figurehead. It's best, Linda chimed in. The board will feel better. You're young. You could ruin everything with one wrong move. There it was, their real play. They thought I'd hand it over, step aside like a good little girl. And if I say no? I asked. Linda's expression darkened. Don't be reckless. Meaning you'll make it hard for me, I said, standing. Thanks for the offer, but I'll take my chances. She grabbed my wrist as I turned. You don't know how this world works, she hissed. Grandpa didn't help compound interest you. He put a target on your back. I pulled free, holding her gaze. I needed you to believe in me once, Mom. You never did. I'm not that scared kid anymore. Tom stood, patience gone. You'll regret this when it blows up in your face. I smiled. I won't. Then I walked out, leaving them behind. Grandpa had chosen me, and I was ready to fight for it. I knew Linda and Tom wouldn't let it go that easily. Their plan to sweet-talk me into a figurehead role had flopped, so I braced myself for the next hit. It came 2 days later, right outside Rogers Enterprises headquarters. The building loomed above me, a sleek tower of glass and steel, glinting in the morning sun, a symbol of everything Grandpa James had built, and everything I now had to protect. I was stepping out of my car, steeling myself for my first official board meeting as CEO, when a familiar voice cut through the hum of the city. Scarlett, we need to talk, Linda called, her tone too calm, too practiced. She stood by the entrance with Tom, their expressions carefully neutral, like predators sizing up prey. I stopped, keys still in hand, and met her gaze. Talk then, I said flatly, not moving an inch toward them. Tom glanced around, lowering his voice. Not here, somewhere private. Every instinct screamed to walk away, to ignore whatever desperate pitch they'd cooked up. But a small, stubborn part of me wanted to hear it, if only to know what I was up against. I exhaled slowly. Fine, 5 minutes. We ended up in a small conference room just inside the building, the walls bare and the air stale. Tom sat down like he owned the place, while Linda stood stiffly, arms crossed, watching me like a hawk. She started soft, almost gentle. You're in over your head, Scarlett. Grandpa put an impossible burden on you, and it's not fair to expect you to run a billion-dollar empire at 26. I smirked, leaning back in my chair. And you think Tom should run it instead? Yes, she said, without missing a beat. At least for now. He's got experience in leadership. You could learn from him. Tom jumped in, his smile rehearsed. Not exactly handing it over, a partnership. You'd still be the face of the company, keep your title. I'd handle the operations, no board meetings, no tough decisions. You could just enjoy your life. I tilted my head, letting the words hang. So, I'd be a figurehead. It's the best arrangement, Linda pressed, her voice tightening. The board will feel more comfortable and you won't have to deal with the stress of making mistakes. You're still so young, Scarlett. One wrong move, and you could ruin everything Grandpa built. There it was. The manipulation, the subtle jabs dressed up as concern. I pretended to mull it over, then asked, What happens if I say no? Linda's expression darkened, her eyes narrowing. Don't be reckless. Meaning what? I pushed, crossing my arms. You'll sabotage me? Tom smirked, not denying it. And that's when I knew. This wasn't a truce, it was a warning shot. I stood, done with their game. Thanks for the chat. I'll take my chances. Linda shot up, grabbing my wrist as I turned for the door. You don't understand how this world works, she hissed. Grandpa didn't do you a favor. He put a target on your back. The board will eat you alive without us. I yanked my arm free, holding her stare. I needed you to believe in me once, Mom. You never did. I'm not scared anymore. Tom rose, his patience fraying. Don't come crying when it all blows up, Scarlett. I won't, I said and walked out, the door clicking shut behind me. My pulse raced, but I wasn't afraid, just ready. The real attack hit later that day. I walked into the boardroom, a long mahogany table under harsh lights, every seat filled with gray-haired men and women who'd served Grandpa for decades. I took my place at the head, forcing a steady breath, but the air shifted before I could even speak. Mr. Grayson, a board member with a permanent scowl, leaned forward, his voice tight. Scarlett, before we start, we need to address the elephant in the room, he said, exchanging glances with the others. Your grandfather was a brilliant man, but let's be honest, he made an impulsive call, putting you in charge. You don't have the qualifications, the experience. We're concerned. I kept my face neutral, though my chest tightened. Concerned about what? I asked. Your ability to lead, he shot back, blunt as a hammer. Another member, Mrs. Carter, sighed, scrolling her phone. The media's already on it, she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Headlines aren't kind. My stomach dropped. I slipped my phone under the table and pulled up the news. The words hit like a punch. Rogers' empire falls to novice hands. Can the heir handle it? Corporate gamble, 26-year-old Scarlett Rogers takes over billion-dollar firm. I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't random. It was sabotage, and I'd bet my new title Linda and Tom were behind it. By the time the meeting ended, my phone buzzed with 3 missed calls from PR. I locked myself in my office, listening to their frantic voicemails. Scarlett, the media firestorm's growing. Stocks dipped 3% this morning. Someone leaked damaging statements about your inexperience. The board's talking an alternative leadership plan. I clenched my jaw. A coup, already. I dialed Ethan Carter, Grandpa's most trusted partner, a 55-year-old financial wizard who'd turned failing companies into gold, and who despised Linda and Tom as much as I did. He picked up on the second ring, his voice smooth. I was wondering when you'd call. I need your help, Ethan, I said, no preamble. They're holding a vote in 2 days. Ethan's voice carried a hint of amusement over the line. I assume this is about the media circus? You assume correctly, I said, pacing my office, the city skyline sprawling beyond the glass. The board's sharpening their knives. They're voting in 2 days. He hummed, unfazed. Classic corporate betrayal. Well then, Scarlett, it's time we remind them why James chose you. I met him that night in his private office, a sleek, glass-walled space high above the city. He studied me as I walked in, then smirked. You're not scared. No, I said, and meant it. Determination had taken root, and with Ethan in my corner, I felt the first flicker of something stronger. Control. Good, he said, leaning back. Then let's crush them. We spent hours building a plan. First, the board meeting trap. Ethan would rally key investors still loyal to Grandpa's vision, getting them to publicly back me before the vote. Second, the media takeover. I'd do an exclusive interview, countering the leaks with my qualifications and Grandpa's own words from his letter. Third, exposing the sabotage. Ethan had contacts who could trace the leak's source. If Linda or Tom were behind it, we'd drag them into the light. By midnight, my head buzzed with strategy, but I felt alive. I shook Ethan's hand, firm and steady. Thank you for this. Don't thank me yet, he said, grinning. Wait till we see their faces, when they realize You're not so easy to ditch. The next morning, the headlines shifted. CEO Scarlett Rogers breaks. Silence. Exclusive interview tonight. Rogers Enterprises stock stabilizes as investors show support. I sat at my desk, watching the tide turn, a slow smile creeping up. PR called, less frantic now. The interview's set for 8 p.m. We've got investors on board. Ethan's a miracle worker. I nodded to myself. He was, but so was Grandpa. He'd left me the tools to win, and I was using them. That afternoon, Linda and Tom made their last play. I was leaving my office for a coffee break when they appeared in the hallway, their expressions too calm, too calculated. "Scarlett," Linda said, voice smooth as silk. "We need to talk, just the three of us." I stopped, cup in hand, and raised an eyebrow. "Again?" Tom stepped closer, his tone low. "This is your last chance to do this the easy way." I almost laughed. "The easy way being what? Handing you the company?" Linda's mask slipped, just a fraction. "You're making enemies, Scarlett. The board doesn't trust you. Shareholders will question every move. If you refuse us, we won't shield you from that pressure." I sipped my coffee, letting her words settle, then looked at Tom. "You mean you'll sabotage me more than you already have?" His smirk flickered, but he didn't deny it. Linda pressed on, her voice hardening. "You're not ready for this. You think Grandpa did you a favor? He set you up to fail." I set the cup down, stepping closer. "No, Mom. He set me up to win. You just can't stand that he saw through you." Tom's patience snapped. "You're making a huge mistake. Don't come crawling back when it falls apart." "I won't," I said, and turned away. Linda called after me. "Scarlett, don't do this." But I kept walking, her voice fading into the hum of the building. The interview aired that night. I sat across from a sharp-eyed reporter, lights hot on my face, and told my story. "My grandfather chose me because he believed in me," I said, voice steady. "I've shadowed him since I was a kid. Every summer, every meeting. I know this company, and I've got a team he trusted to guide me." The reporter leaned in. "What about the leaks saying you're too young?" I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Those leaks came from someone who wants my job. We're tracing them now. The truth's coming out soon." By morning, the narrative flipped. Who's behind the smear campaign? Sources point to corporate backstabbing. Stocks climbed back up. Ethan called, his voice smug. "Told you we'd turn it around? The investors are solid. Board's on notice." I exhaled, relief washing over me. "And the leaks?" "Working on it," he said. "Give me a day. We'll have proof." That proof came faster than I expected. The next afternoon, Ethan emailed me a file. Emails, texts, call logs, all tied to a private account in Tom's name. He'd fed the media lies, contacted competitors to weaken our market position, all while playing the savior. I stared at the screen, my pulse spiking. This wasn't just sabotage, it was betrayal on a level I hadn't imagined. I forwarded it to Ethan. "This enough?" "More than enough," he replied. "Board meetings tomorrow. Bring it." I leaned back, a quiet triumph settling in. Linda and Tom thought they could break me, but they'd handed me the weapon to bury them instead. Grandpa had been right. They'd try to take it, but I wasn't alone. Tomorrow, I'd show them exactly who they were dealing with. The morning of the board vote dawned cold and clear. I stood outside Rogers Enterprises, staring up at the glass tower that was mine to defend. Today would decide it all. Either I'd prove Grandpa James made the right call, or Linda and Tom would rip it away before I'd even begun. I straightened my jacket, the folder of evidence from Ethan tucked under my arm, and walked inside. My pulse thrummed, but my steps were steady. The boardroom was packed, every seat around the long mahogany table filled with stern faces. Men and women who'd built their careers under Grandpa, now eyeing me with doubt. Mr. Grayson sat at the head, his scowl deeper than ever. He banged a gavel once, his voice cutting through the murmurs. We'll begin with a vote. As many of you know, concerns have been raised about Scarlett Rogers' ability to lead. Several members have proposed an alternative plan, which we'll discuss now. The doors swung open, and there they were, Linda and Tom, striding in like they'd already won. My stomach tightened, but I wasn't surprised. They'd orchestrated this from the start. Tom cleared his throat, stepping forward with a practiced ease, his tone dripping with authority. Ladies and gentlemen, let's be honest. Running this company takes years of experience, and as much as we respect Scarlett, he flashed me a fake smile, we must prioritize what's best for Rogers Enterprises. I watched him pace, hands clasped behind his back, every word rehearsed. I have the experience, he continued. I know the company, and I have a strong vision for its future. That's why I propose I take over as CEO, with Scarlett remaining involved as a figurehead, the public face of the company. He sat down, smug, like the deal was sealed. Linda stood beside him, her eyes locked on me, daring me to flinch. The room hung silent for a beat, and I let it stretch, feeling the weight of their confidence. Then I spoke, my voice calm, deliberate. It's funny, Tom, because I remember you saying something very different in your private conversations. His face twitched, a crack in his mask. Excuse me? He said, leaning forward. I nodded to Ethan, seated beside me. He slid the folder across the table, its contents fanning out. Emails, texts, call logs, all damning. In the past week, I said, keeping my gaze on Tom, you and Linda have been working to sabotage my leadership. But it's not just the media leaks. You've been undermining the company itself. The board members reached for the papers, their expressions shifting as they read. Mr. Grayson's eyes narrowed, his voice low. What is this? Proof, Ethan said smoothly, leaning back. Proof that Tom's been contacting competitors, negotiating deals to weaken our market position, all while pretending to save us. Tom's face turned red, his hands gripping the table. This is outrageous. You can't prove... Oh, but we can, I cut in, my tone sharp. We traced the media leaks, too. They came from a private email registered in your name. Tom. Every lie about my inexperience, every headline, it's all you. The room erupted in murmurs, heads turning, eyes darting between me and Tom. Linda shot up, her glare piercing. Scarlett, enough! You're being ridiculous trying to smear him because you're scared. I smiled, slow and steady. I don't have to smear him, Mom. He did that himself. She opened her mouth to argue, but Mr. Grayson slammed his hand on the table, silencing her. That's enough, he barked, his voice cold. He turned to Tom, disgust etched in his frown. You were plotting against this company while posing as its savior. That alone disqualifies you. Tom's panic flared, his jaw clenching as he realized he'd lost. This is a setup, he started, but Grayson cut him off. It's time to vote, he said, his tone final. The board members exchanged glances, then one by one, hands rose in my favor. The count came unanimous, so I was CEO, officially, undeniably. I exhaled, my chest loosening as relief flooded in. Security escorted Tom out within the hour, his protests echoing down the hall. Linda followed, humiliated, pausing at the door to whisper, You'll regret this, Scarlett. I didn't answer. She'd lost, and she knew it. Later in my office, Ethan smirked across the desk. You did good, kid. James would be proud. I smiled back, the weight of victory settling in. Thanks, Ethan, for everything. A year later, I stood at a podium, facing a packed audience, the hum of their anticipation buzzing in my ears. The spotlight was warm, the business magazine in my hand crisp, its headline bold, Scarlett Rogers, the CEO who silenced the doubters. I took a breath, letting the moment sink in, then spoke, my voice steady. When my grandfather chose me to run Rogers Enterprises, plenty of people doubted me. They said I was too young, too inexperienced. I glanced at the magazine, then back at the crowd. But what they didn't see was that success isn't about age. It's about preparation, perseverance, and rising when everyone expects you to fall. The applause rolled through the room, loud and warm. I smiled, feeling the weight of the past year, not just the battles, but the wins. The company had thrived under me, stocks climbing, new deals signed. Linda and Tom had faded into irrelevance, their schemes buried by the truth I'd laid bare that day in the boardroom. I'd spent that first night after the vote sleepless, not from fear, but from the sheer size of it all. CEO at 26, an empire in my hands. Grandpa's belief in me had kept me steady then, and it did now. He'd seen what Linda never could. I wasn't here to take. I was here to build. Ethan sat in the front row, his grin sharp as ever. He'd stuck by me through the transition, his advice cutting through the noise. When the board tested me, when investors wavered. Now, as the clapping faded, he leaned back, arms crossed, a nod of approval in his eyes. I stepped off the stage later, the crowd still buzzing, and Ethan met me by the sidelines. "Nice speech," he said, his voice low, amused. "You earned this." "Thanks," I said, matching his grin. "Couldn't have done it without you." "Don't mention it," he replied, stretching. "Now go celebrate. You've earned that too." I nodded, but as he walked off, I lingered, flipping open the magazine again. The article detailed it all: the will, the sabotage, the vote, painting me as the underdog who'd turned the tables. It wasn't wrong, but it wasn't the whole story. I hadn't just survived Linda and Tom. I'd forged something new, a legacy that was mine as much as Grandpa's. That night, alone in my office, I looked out at the city skyline, the tower's lights reflecting off the glass. It felt right. Not heavy, not daunting, just mine. I'd proven them wrong, not with luck, but with grit. And I wasn't done yet.